Hello, I'm Rogerbrown from Method here at BlizzCon, and we're going to have an interview here with Morgan and Eli. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves for anyone that might not know you already?
Yeah, so my name's Morgan Day. I'm a designer on the World of Warcraft team.
And I'm Eli Cannon. I'm Assistant Art Director on World of Warcraft.
Awesome. So I'm just going to dive straight into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Method is obviously always at the cutting edge of progression. And already on the PTR, we got a chance to test the new bosses of the upcoming raid, the Battle of Dazara Lore. And I must admit, I was very pleasantly surprised. Both of the aesthetics, the creativity of the mechanics of the bosses, and just the overall feel of the raid is, I think, one of the best raids I've seen on the PTR at least.
Awesome.
Now, there is, though, something new that we're doing in this raid. So, Alliance and Horde are going to have a separate experience when they get in there.
Yeah, totally.
How is this exactly going to play out? Because there's some concerns that maybe if one faction will have a advantage, let's say, over the other one. So, how is it going to be from boss 1 till the last boss? I'm not even sure how many bosses we're going to be fighting. So
yeah, I can explain that a bit. So it's so the Battle for Dazara Lore in Tides of Vengeance is a 9-boss raid, and like you mentioned, we're trying some things here where we've never really had the opportunity to try this stuff. So one of the things that we're doing is the Horde and Alliance are actually going to have different starting locations. So the Alliance, as you're going to see them come through the war campaign, and they're going to have a lot of cool questing that leads into this experience, and they're going to go out and conscript some new help, and maybe they're going to set up some bombs that'll help them get into the harbor, and there'll also be some questing that we'll see the Horde will actually come into the raid from the mainland, from inland. So they actually have a different starting location, and there's actually some cool stuff that takes place that will show you why are they, it's like what happened here? Why didn't they see this attack coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of the actual bosses, so the way it'll play out is we'll have actually there's only one boss that is in a different order, but for the most part it's still 1 through 9. Both factions will experience I think it's from boss 4 till 9 that are all the same order and the same bosses as well. So even if you're Horde or Alliance, it will change the way that you experience the raid in terms of, you know, if you're an Alliance player, you come into the raid and you fight your way through into the pyramid, you encounter King Rastakhan, you fight your way back out, and then when you get back to Borealis, you're like, what happened here? Where's Jaina? Why is Mechatork all messed up? Spoilers, by the way. Well, what's going on here? Why did this happen? Actually, and then, you know, you'll see a survivor that's on Borealis, and he'll tell you, like, okay, let me tell you what happened. I was there. This is what happened. And then you'll actually play through you'll play through the content as a Horde player at that point as well, and you'll get to experience, you know, the content from the other side's perspective, and you'll actually be a Horde player at that point. So like your racials
I saw that a bit on the PTR.
Yeah, so your racials will swap out, and it'll be kind of new.
When did I race swap to a dwarf? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. So we talked a lot about that, and we actually think, you know, like I mentioned, there's only the boss 2 for the Horde is King Grong, who's the big ape creature.
Oh yeah, the gorilla.
Yeah, I'm sure as we've seen, you know, King Rastakhan has taken on Bwonsamdi as his Loa when Razan was killed. So King Rastakhan will actually call on Bwonsamdi to his aid, and they'll resurrect King Grong and send him back against the Alliance, and they'll turn him against him, and he'll be boss 3 for the Alliance instead of boss 2 for the Horde. So that's the only difference. So it would be like if you know, Mother and one of the other bosses were switched in order, but for the most part, I think, you know, you guys will experience it.
It's going to be the same.
Exactly.
So does that mean that the Horde players are going to get to do the quote-unquote Alliance encounters before finishing their bosses? They can't. Okay, all right. Because there was this idea that maybe the Horde will kill the number 4, 5, and 6 bosses. They would be swapped, but you're saying no, it's going to be the same.
From boss 5 to 9, it'll be the same order for both sides. It was really one of those things where we were saying, like, this is an opportunity we have to tell this story in a really interesting way.
That's
and
really cool.
We talked a lot about that, actually. Like, what if it was, you know, Jaina for one side and Rastakhan for the other? And then when we got to talking about it, we were like, yeah, but the continuity there doesn't make as much sense, right? So the way it'll end up playing out is, as you're a Horde player, you get in there, you fight your way to Rastakhan, you see him after the battle, and you're like, what happened here? No. How did you let this happen, right? And then they flip into the Alliance experience where they get to fight up to him and see firsthand exactly what just happened. And then they'll go back and then they'll fight Mechatork and the Sea Priests, and then
Awesome,
finally
awesome.
find our way to Jaina.
Okay, and just a quick other question about that raid. Will we actually get to see, as a Horde player, the Alliance players somewhere in the distance doing something, and we're like, oh no, we need to come to the aid of our king and stuff?
Yeah, we've definitely talked a lot about that. Like, I know the team's been working really, really hard on Battle for Dazar'alor. It's one of those things that we said, like, every time we talk about it, like, this is such an awesome opportunity to do things like that. Like, one of the things we talked about was, what if as an Alliance player, when you're switching to the Horde perspective and you're standing on the balcony overlooking the harbor, what if you saw your own character run underneath Mechatorp or something like that? So we've definitely been talking about, things like that and opportunities that we have that is super exciting for this raid, because it's, like we said, it's a really unique experience for both the players and for us to have this chance to make
something very new.
Yeah, totally. To make something different that we haven't done before. It's very challenging, but we're excited for
It's
people
going
to
to
see
be
it.
awesome to see how it plays out.
And the player reception, like you said, seems to be really, really good so far.
I must say, like, especially the bosses, very, very creative. I love splitting the raid in half, and there's a couple of encounters with that.
Yeah.
So great. And also, I must say, huge props to the art style of the, can't remember the name, but where you split up the raid, you defeat the 2 Stone Guardians.
Yeah.
And then what's the name of that last
Opulence.
boss? Yeah, that
The
just looks
treasure room
amazing.
boss. Yeah,
Amazing.
awesome.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, as we were talking about this raid, we were saying, like, well, this is different, right? Like, we're going in here with an objective, right? We're going in here, and what would we want to achieve as an Alliance player? We would want to strike a blow at the Horde that they would really feel. So how would we do that, right? Well, we would break into their treasury. We would steal any artifacts that we could as we get in there. So as we were discussing, like, what the spaces in the raid were, we were talking a lot about, like, what would you find in this great pyramid of Dazar'alor, right? Like, what would be under this pyramid? And we take a lot of inspiration and influences from other areas, and you always hear about, like, the tombs with all the treasure inside of it and stuff like that. So we definitely looked at that as a chance to say, like, okay, we have to make, like, the coolest treasure room ever. And what would you fight in this treasure room? Obviously a treasure golem. Obviously.
That's the only logical
exactly.
explanation. All right, so moving on to the 8.2 patch stuff that were announced at the BlizzCon. So we're gonna go and experience 2 new zones. The Naz-Zatar, not sure if I'm pronouncing, and Mechagon. So it was a bit unclear to me how big those new zones are going to be. So is it like a small island? Is it a whole new continent? I'm not sure how it's...
They're large. They'll support full questing. There's going to be a bunch of end game content there. There's, I think, 5 separate environment types just in Naz-Zatar. I mean, it's pretty extensive, and we've poured a lot of resources and time into just making it as awesome as possible. And of course, we wanted to go see where the Naga come from, where they lived for years and years and years. We get to see Zinajari. We get to see, the Eternal Palace. It's going to be really fun. It's a very, very big and epic space to explore.
So in terms of size, would we look at something similar to how Argus was, the 3 zones there?
I'm trying to think of a comparable size. I can't think off the top of my head the exact comparable size, but it's going to feel big.
It's not like a small timeless isle.
No.
Okay.
It's a full adventure zone.
Awesome. All right. And actually in there's this new mega dungeon, right? So, and I'm super excited for that. The only question I have is, will it be for Mythic Class, available for Mythic Class? And will it be split in 2, just like Karazhan? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about that in terms of, like, we actually really liked the experience that we presented with Karazhan, where there was this big epic dungeon, and it felt like, okay, we're gonna get our group together, and we're gonna be in here for a while, guys. Are you ready for this? This is gonna take some time, and there was a lot of space to explore, and I'm not sure if you saw, but on the panel there was a "for now." I think that was one of those things that we looked at Karazhan, and we looked at, we want to introduce this dungeon as this big, epic, mythic-only dungeon, and then we can take the opportunity in future updates to look at, how do we want to handle this dungeon with Mythic Plus? Do we want to do it similar how we did with Karazhan? Because I personally felt like the Karazhan model that we did, where, like you said, it got split up into 2, we could make some heroics and then throw it into the Mythic Plus pool also. Thought that was fairly successful.
That was pretty good,
so that was something that we were looking at to take inspiration from again.
Awesome. Can't wait to try that dungeon.
Yeah,
it looks amazing as well. And can't wait to slay some gnomes, actually.
Mecha gnomes.
So yeah, speaking of Mythic Plus, we are going to be moving on from the Season 1 with the Infested affix that you get at Mythic Plus 10 and beyond. Are we going to see a new affix coming into Season 2 in Tides of Vengeance?
Yeah, totally. I can talk about that.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, were you guys in the finals? I didn't get a chance to see it.
Of the MDI?
Yeah.
So we had 2 teams out of 4. We lost.
Aww.
We had 1 team in the finals.
Nice.
But that's because in the semis, it was 2 of our teams playing each other.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that. It sounds like it was a epic ending.
Okay.
So with Battle for Azeroth, we were looking at a lot of our the strong foundation we had built with Legion and some of the systems like Mythic Plus that we introduced there, and we said, how do we update this? What do we want to do? What are things that we could change here to keep it fresh and exciting? And one of the ideas that we ended up going forward with was this idea of the seasonal affix, right? We moved Fortified and Tyrannical from 10 to Mythic Keystone 2, so you always start with an affix. And then the first affix was Infested, like you saw, which should hopefully felt very thematic with Old Deer and Gahoon, who was this old god who was very like blood and infestation oriented. So with Season 2, and we're looking towards Battle for Dazara lore as inspiration there. As I mentioned, Bwonsamdi, who is Rastakhan's Loa, is a big part of that raid, and he's who we were drawing our inspiration from for Season 2. So there's going to be a new affix called Reaping.
Reaping.
And I know people were speculating what it was, but we can just chat about it now because I think it's super cool. The way that'll work is we're doing something we haven't tried before, which is every 20% on the enemy forces bar. So when the enemy forces hits 20%,
right,
Bwonsamdi will resurrect spirits from all of the creatures that you had killed, all the trash creatures that you had killed up to that point, and they'll all rush you. Like they will charge
no matter
at you,
where you're at.
No matter where you are, no matter where you killed them, they will charge at you and try to like swarm you. So it should feel very like scary and creepy, and you'll want to huddle up in a corner and take shelter from them. And one of the ideas that we had with this was, we want to make how you approach the dungeon feel different, right? So while right now you might have a very specific path that you would take in a dungeon like Freehold or Atal Dazar, and with Reaping, once that becomes active, you'll have to kind of rethink that because, you wouldn't want to fight the trash pack, be in the middle of fighting the trash pack in front of Volcall in Atal Dazar when you hit 20% enemy forces, because that's going to end poorly, I promise.
And it's like 5 times every
time. Yeah, so it'll happen 5 times throughout the instance.
That's
every time you hit
actually,
that marker, you'll be able to kind of plan for it and prepare
for
it.
So just a little bit more specifics. So when you hit 20%, it just automatically... Like, do you get a little bit of time to set up and stuff? Or is it like
once somebody shows up and he has a line where he says "rise" and everything in the instance starts to run at you, and they have to run to you. It will take different amounts of time for them to get to you. So maybe there's some positioning where you want to kill creatures in different areas where you might not have wanted them to die before because they have to travel.
Is there like a huge visual effect as well to accommodate that?
Yeah, so it's going to be cool. The Bwonsamdi is very much. Has this idea of this blood moon that he'll rise, that rises when he calls on his power. So no matter what instance you're in, the blood moon will rise. If speaking of the Atal Dazar example, if you're in Atal Dazar, you can see the blood moon rise. The dungeon gets really dark, and there's also some cool stuff that might happen after you lose the timer. If you happen to lose the timer, there might be some stuff in there. I won't spoil that, but that should hopefully go up on the PTR soon, and people can actually test it out and give us feedback. But this is a thing that we were, with Tides of Vengeance and Season 2 with, Mythic Class and the PvP season and the raid, we wanted to create this, opportunity to try something different.
Awesome. So for all of the depleters like me, it's going to be an excellent experience coming up. Just quickly speaking on the Mythic Plus, just like a personal thought about moving forward with the seasonal affixes. Do you think this affix is going to affect the feel and speed of Mythic Plus? Because currently a lot of people think that with the infested mechanic, it slows you down a bit because you have to pull smaller packs or CC the mobs. Is this going to increase the pace and give more of a feel of a speed run rather than a control run.
Right. So one of the ideas, like I mentioned, was that you should be able to plan around this, right? It's in your control when it triggers. You can, say like, okay, what pull do we want to go after to trigger this? Where's our positioning? And then the idea is that it should feel like this big moment that happens, and it'll happen, like I said, 5 times. So it would. I'm not sure how it will compare against Infested in terms of the time it takes to get through it, but on that point as well, we do want to take a look at our Mythic Dungeon just tuning across the board, really. That's another thing that we want to take a look at.
The other
with Tides of
affixes, you
Vengeance.
mean?
Well, not just the affixes, but the dungeon themselves.
dungeons.
Right? I know a lot of people have feedback when they might get a Shrine of the Storm key and be like, oh boy,
here we go.
This is going to be tough, right? We want to take a look at that as well as the affixes themselves. We are also looking at some of the other affixes with Tides of Vengeance updates. For instance, we look at affixes as opportunities for people to kind of really make the strength of their class or spec shine, and in some cases even weaknesses of that class or spec be more of a weakness for them.
Right.
So something that we made a change to was actually the Necrotic affix.
Oh.
We always thought of the Necrotic affix as an affix that would be really hard for tanks that have to heal a lot, right? So it might be really dangerous for a blood decay on Necrotic Weekend, who have to think about how he pulls differently, who have to think about his cooldowns. So we're actually changing Necrotic to be physical instead of magical.
Oh,
so that
nice.
Death Knights are very strong against magic damage in a lot of cases. So this is a change that will maybe play to their weaknesses a little bit more than their strengths. So some of the other tank specs might be able to play to that strength during Necrotic.
Any paladins out there gonna start Blessing of Protectioning everyone?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I have a paladin, so that's good news.
I mean, that's another great point, right? Like on
Right.
Necrotic Week, your paladin buddy is going to feel a lot more powerful. Like, hey, I want a holy paladin this week. That was, one of the things that we talk a lot about with Mythic Plus, and one of the cool parts about it was it will change how you experience the dungeon, but also what people's strengths and weaknesses can shine in those weeks.
Awesome. In BFA, just overall, we saw a lot of the abilities that got added to the GCD. And during the beta, actually, some of them were taken off after hearing some feedback. Would we potentially see more of them be taken off or even added on the GCD in the future? And just as a personal feeling, for example, the exhilaration cooldown on the hunters, because it's a defensive cooldown, and I would personally like it to be off the GCD, but
so we've talked a lot about the GCD changes. We really looked at BFA as an opportunity to kind of take a really wide look at just the combat pacing in World of Warcraft and the things that we felt like, some of those abilities that you might just throw on a macro, right? Like if you have a bunch of DPS cooldowns, you just throw them on a macro and it doesn't feel great when you talent into that button, and you want to make it feel like this epic moment when you just say like, all right, I'm pushing this big button now. We looked at those and tried to find opportunities to change the design where necessary, right? Like if you have 2 cooldowns, you might want to use them at different times, right? We also made changes to things like Warrior Bloodbath, so that it had more impact damage. So you wanted to use that strategically at different times. Honestly, it even points to some of the art of those abilities, right?
That's right.
In Tides of Vengeance, Paladins are getting new Avenging Wrath animations, right? We want that moment to feel awesome. The area that we're huge players ourselves. We love the game as much as our passionate audience. We are constantly playing. I do a ton of Mythic Plus myself. Right? The areas that we have felt that change the most are some of the mobility abilities that have been put on the GCD as well. Like if you're a warrior and you were used to getting in that one last mortal strike and then you can charge away to another enemy, you can't really do that anymore.
You can't,
so we are in Tides of Vengeance specifically taking a look at all of those mobility buttons and looking to remove them from the GCD in a lot of cases. So like for you, for instance, you already have disengage off GCD.
Yes.
Right? And that was just another one of those examples of like, this feels really good for it to be off GCD. Let's take that same sweep across all of the classes and specs and make similar changes.
But the defensive ones, we might look at them later on.
Right now, we're just taking an eye towards the mobility buttons. I think defensive ones are certainly something that we can continue to discuss. But yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. you have all these cool animations when you pop your cooldowns.
Yeah.
And if you stack them all together, then you don't get to see them, to be honest. You just see everything happening in 1 second and then it's over. And I must say also, I've seen a lot of animations on the PTR have been changed, especially like the Holy Paladin, the cone heel.
Oh yeah.
That looks awesome.
Yeah. Have you seen Lay on Hands?
No.
It's getting updated.
It's pretty cool. All of the animations, to be honest, are just
I love the
really great. And,
the Paladin with their Librams and their books, right? That's always been a really big theme of theirs, that we've wanted to try to get that more integrated into the combat.
It's all an attempt really to play back to the fantasy of what it means to be a paladin as opposed to a priest.
I still remember in the TBC cinematic where the Draenei Paladin would like open the book and then cast a spell.
Yeah.
So
Very
awesome.
cool.
Big hammer.
With the removal of the tier pieces from raids, they kind of lost this unique thing, this unique reward that you got only from raiding, and especially with the addition of the Azurite vendor, could we potentially see a new incentive for people to get into high-end raiding? Because right now you can pretty much do everything outside of raids. So.
Yeah, so with the vendor in particular, we were really listening to a lot of feedback from players about who run a lot of Mythic Plus, and they're saying like, I want this helmet out of this dungeon, and how do I get it? The only chance you had at that was out of your weekly cash. So that was in response to feedback from Mythic Plus players who felt like they really had almost no agency over how to get that helm from that dungeon. That's a specific solution for that problem in terms of the set stuff. We look at Azurite armor as an opportunity to try something different from sets. We think Azurite has a lot of really awesome opportunities to improve it. With Tides of Vengeance, we're adding a lot of new things, like the new ring, with the more spec specific traits. There will be the new raid trait in Battle for Desire lore, and also look for new updates to some of the raid items in Battle for Desire lore that have new effects that are unique to the raid that players might find super interesting. So while sets, I think, are something that we have done a lot with in the past, Azurite is something that we're trying for this expansion, but we hear the feedback of we want to make sure that there are fun, exciting, unique things for you to chase in the raid as well.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you so much for the interview, and can't wait to see what comes next in the expansion.
Awesome.
And especially the raid.
Yeah.
All the bosses look amazing, and can't wait to test them out.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Hope
guys.
Thanks
enjoy
so
it.
much.
Nice talking to
Thanks,
you.
buddy.
Thank you.